We're doing things a little different this week. Let's start off with an introduction and a throwback drink of the night. Welcome to Thoughts in the Glass podcast. I'm LaToya.
And I'm Kendra.
This is a weekly podcast where we share our unfiltered thoughts and opinions on a variety of topics.
So sit back, relax, and join us on a conversation of real, raw, and ridiculously funny commentary.
Period. Every week we do a drink of the night. Kendra, what's our drink tonight?
So our drink tonight is brought to you by LaToya's auntie, Deborah.
I need to get her TikTok name. Educate something. I don't know. I'll put it on the screen.
Okay, so this is a limoncello drop. And really easy to make. It gives very much so lemon drop with a twist. So you're going to do, and of course the recipe that I'm giving you is just for one person. Ours is doubled, so do what you meant with this information. Hopefully make a drink. So you're going to do 2 ounces of whatever your favorite vodka is. Right in this video we're using Grey Goose. We use an ounce of limoncello, and then you're going to do about half an ounce to an ounce of fresh squeezed lemon juice. Take your glass. I mean, of course, you keep that cold, shake that on up. You're going to rim your glass with lemon juice, and then you're going to do what is this, like a
lemon sugar?
Lemony sugar.
Yeah.
And then top your glass off with your cocktail mix. Add a lemon for decoration. And sip.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm.
Last weekend, I had the opportunity to curate an adult book fair at Pop-Up and Grow Vendor Market in Waldorf. This event was everything. We focused on highlighting local authors, and we had several book discussion sessions, and a few of the other authors sold their books at their display tables. I really enjoyed planning this event and seeing it all come together, and I look forward to doing it again because we need more events like these in the community. We don't have to go to DC and Virginia for everything. We can have fun stuff in our own backyard. I appreciate my friends and family coming out to see me, especially Noah, friend of the pod, and my homegirl Shantae, Ruby, my family, all of those that came out to support. I really appreciate it. I also moderated a session for author Indy Jones. So I'm doing something a little different this week. I wanted to share with you guys a portion of the interview that I did with Indy Jones. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so before we get started, can you let the people know a little bit about you and your book?
By the way, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it, and we're going to give you an opportunity to learn more about me, and hopefully I can learn a little bit more about you as well. But my name is Indy Jones, and I am from Baltimore. This is my first actual historical fantasy fiction, Harriet Escape, Harriet Tubman Reimagined. I've been writing for about 13 years now, and we can talk a little bit more about that if you want. But I'm primarily like a fantasy author that centers Black characters, as you can see if you had an opportunity to walk past my table. And well, she has like excellent questions, so we can really take a deep dive into this book to learn a bit more about it. So thank you as well.
Of course. And before I get into Harriet's Escape, you have been writing for a long time, so this is not your first rodeo. And you're also an educator.
I am.
So you didn't say those things when you talked about yourself, so I just wanted to make sure we
okay, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so backstory. So I mentioned that I'm from Baltimore, and I was a Baltimore City social studies teacher for about 10 years. I taught African American history, U.S. history, American government to mainly 10, 11, 12th graders. I'm still in education. I am at Anne Arundel County Public Schools in their division of professional growth and development. That's not what they call it anymore. It's a really weird long title, but that's what it is still. And so Harriet's Escape is a really beautiful confluence of me being an educator and my knowledge and passion about that and my love for fantasy. So it was an opportunity for me to pull in those two pieces or parts of myself into this first book in the series.
Okay, now we can talk about the book.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, so for me, that's important because I've said this before. If anybody has heard me speak, listened to my podcast, or been around me, I have a lot of educators in my family, and so that's important to acknowledge that. So now we get into the book because I really enjoyed it. So in Harriet's Escape, you take a real historical figure and reimagine her as Minty, which I think Minty was actually Harriet Tubman's name. But you reimagine her as the Sankofa bird shifter. What made you choose fantasy as the lens to retell this already powerful story?
So, I'm trying to think of a short way of putting this. I had initially purchased like a pre-made book cover online. Sometimes I have my book covers made from scratch. Sometimes I'm inspired by what a cover designer may have created. And so she created this book cover. I had no idea what it was. It was a black woman. I love all the fantasy aspects of it. And I said, I'm going to do something with that cover. And I thought, well, maybe I can make it into a trilogy. It actually was not this cover. I was thinking about Asana Shakur. Don't ask me why, but it was something about that cover that made me think of her. So I said, well, what if I actually engaged in a seizing freedom? Look at different parts of African American history and the people who sought freedom in different ways. And so that allowed me to take a much deeper dive into Harriet Tubman's life that actually I never did in school. And I spent a lot of years in school. And so a lot of times what we do, we kind of cover like that most basic surface level. And you couldn't do that when you really want to write a good story. The fantasy piece is just the fun part. Right? It's the fun part. And so I thought about what are some characters I haven't done before. So I always tell people to come to the table. I'm like, I covered 40 years of her life. You're introduced to her when she's literally 18 months old. The foundation is her family. But I tell it with harpies and griffins and dragons, and then you mentioned the Sankofa birds. I can explain why I use Sankofa. I can't remember if that's one of your questions or not.
Yeah.
Explain. Okay. All right. So once I determined that dragons was going to be like the big bad, okay, and so I'm like, oh, well, what should my foundational character be? So I thought about the Sankofa bird. So if you only think about the Sankofa bird, and it's not a real bird, but you understand as far as Africans and our mythology connecting everything together. So the Sankofa bird, when if you look at that design, the feet are pointing forward, but the head is looking back. It has like a little pearl or jewel in the back. So the whole idea is you're moving forward, but you're also looking back. You're pulling from behind. You haven't forgotten about what came before. And so when I thought about that symbolism, it made, in my mind, perfect sense for Harriet Tubman. She moved forward, but she never forgot the people who was left behind. As a matter of fact, she said that, she was free, but it didn't feel like that freedom because all her family was back in Maryland, was back in Dorchester County. And so the Sankofa bird, for me, for my character of Harriet, made the most sense because it symbolized, in my mind, a lot of what she really did, especially for like those 10 years in which she went back and forth.
Yeah, I don't think that was one of the questions, but I'm glad you addressed it because when I was reading it, I did think about how unique that was to bring that out as when we think about, dragons aren't real either, well, at least from what we know, right? But yet we have in literature given them so much backstory or so much history, right? So to pull that out, to me, it made sense also for it being an African American story. You know what I mean? To bring our own symbolism in it and to give it that texture that maybe it doesn't have as much in media. So I'm glad you explained that. And I want to go back to another point that you said that not just because she's from Maryland, but as a fellow Marylander, yes, because she's from Maryland, and that is a part of our history, but regional history, right? A lot of these figures that we idolize or that get talked about. Yeah, you make the connection because those are your people and you have the same background, but coming from the area also makes it a little bit more closer to home.
Absolutely.
So there is a line in the description that suggests freedom isn't as sweet if you can't share it with the people you love. How did that idea shape Minty's decisions throughout the story?
It was absolutely everything. So like I said, every book that I write, I do a lot of research. Both historical fiction, you have to do a deeper dive. And so I'm going through and I'm looking at everything that she talked about, and it was always really about the family. In school, it's not really taught that way. It's just like, she went on all these missions, and she wanted to free all these people. Foundationally, she was trying to free her sisters, her brothers, and eventually her parents. And so when she couldn't do that, especially with one particular sister, when she went back time and time again, and it just wasn't happening, well, she was like, I'm going to take whoever I can. but it's really about the family. And so I think that's a big piece in my mind that's really missing. It's great altruism, but it's really about connecting all those different pieces of your heart. And so much of our families were broken because of the sale away from whatever that enslaved home may have been, also from people running away. It's a big deal to come back and to come back as many times as she did. And so you have these fragmented families, even with her family. You have some in New York, some in Canada, you have some still in Maryland, and people who probably will never know that they're part of that family because some of her siblings were sold away and they don't have that understanding or that history. So you don't need a bigger reason other than love of family to do what you do. And so I took a lot of time in going through each of these kind of like really big missions, but that was the foundational piece. And so I really wanted to show that. In my mind, looking at history, that was the heart of really who she was. Putting her family together, but helping other people with their families as well.
I'm gonna stay on that point. So now, how did you approach writing community as you just talked about family? So that's such a source of strength and responsibility. I guess talk about how you brought in that element of community and showing that throughout the story.
Absolutely. So I believe I mentioned in the beginning that when you first introduced to Harriet was Araminta Minty in the book, and her name is actually Araminta and Minty for short. So she's 18 months, and so I'm not telling the book from her perspective yet because I'm not getting into the head of an 18-month-old. But in the very beginning, I start the story with her father. And then we have a section with him and his and what's going on with him. He's thinking about his family. And then another section is her mother. And then she has the children around her. And there's other fantasy elements that's involved, but I introduce you to her parents first. That's that foundational piece of the family. And then in telling their story, you're introduced to the siblings who were alive when she was that young. She had a couple that were older. And then I actually, with her younger siblings, you see when her mother is pregnant. You see what happens with her mother and each of them. So as her family grows, you're connecting those different ones. The first time I'm actually in Harriet Tubman's head, she's about 4 or 5. And I remember reading in one of her biographies in which she talks about with her, she had like a younger brother and a younger sister, and they were all very close in age, maybe within a year or two of each other. And she was charged, like many of the young children, and still today, was taking care of the little ones.
At 4.
At 4, right? And so mom's out, dad's out, doing all the things that we know enslaved people were compelled to do. But part of that was to leave children who were way too young and inexperienced at home to take care of younger ones. And so she's relaying this story, the adult Harriet. She's relaying this story, and it's a story where she talked about grabbing up her younger sister when her sister was maybe 6 or 8 months old, and she had this like little long nightgown on, and she's talked about like swinging her by her legs, her feet. Now imagine you're 4 years old. How much are you literally hoisting this child up? So she was like, it was great fun. I was swinging this child around. Ankles here, where's her head? Her head is down there. And she talked about like scuffing the floor of her hair. And then one time she got pop, she knocked the child's head. And the girl is just bawling. And so we talk about community and family, and you want to understand the depth of what it meant to own someone, to control them, to totally upend their families. Those are ways in which you show the impact and the horror and the cruelty of slavery by telling those particular stories. And so I wrote that scene. And in that scene, there's so much more in that scene, but that was part of what I wanted to do. So that's me talking about her at 4 or 5 years old. And it's so much more than that, but that's what it is when you build up community, start with that family, and then you kind of grow out. And each time you focus on a particular community member, you're talking about the experiences, and you're automatically dealing with community.
Yeah. So before she becomes Harriet, she's Minty. She's young. She's uncertain. She's discovering her power. How? I mean, you talked about it a little bit, but I guess take us into your mind a little bit more about how important was it to like chronicleize her entire life and show us how she developed into who she was and recognize who she would become later.
Absolutely. So when I was doing my research, I created a timeline, and there were key moments in my mind that I thought was really critical that I wanted to cover. And I had maybe like 2 or 3 pages of that. So I had this timeline here, and it wasn't just her. It was moments of like when her siblings were sold. You know, when her father was, you know, sent away, and that was a big moment, you know, in her life. When one of her cousins who was almost her age because her sister was so much older than her, like when her family was sold away. So again, that's like the family piece. And then I had another timeline or intermingle with some of like her missions. And because she is so well researched and so well chronicled, it made creating that timeline, you know, really easy. But I had to determine what would be like really important, crucial moments, and going through all of that. But as you're going through her life, you start to see all her struggles, who did all the, you know, abusing, how she persevered. I know we know a lot about the fact that she used to have like blackouts. And do we understand like why she used to really have blackouts, and really what was the situation involved? That the fact that she did what she did with this huge medical condition from when she was little, literally someone was trying to escape, not her at the time, and she was in a general store, and the guy slave owner, he threw like a 2 pound metal weight at this guy who was running away. She got hit in the head. She's bleeding. She talks about in the book how she had a shawl on. She had all this hair. She called it a bushel basket of hair. Never had anything like with combs, all the things we think about being able to naturally groom ourselves, right? And so when that weight struck her, not only did it like literally cut into her scalp to the point whereas the shawl she had on kind of like indented itself. No one cared for her. They took her back home and they just allowed her just to be like that, to bleed and to be in pain. And she's a kid. Twice her mother had to nurse her back to health. So she brings it back. So I'm just saying that to say that these are the stories, horrible stories, but these are all the moments that build everyone, that builds anyone. So not only what happened with you, but what happened with other people and how that impacts you emotionally. So all of that manifest in the person that she became, as far as who the person we understand her to be, as far as history. So it's not heroes in the sense of just, you know, donning capes and you're born with these magic powers. It's not. It's your resolve, it's your resilience, it's just your overall courage and strength and your love for self and other people and your perseverance. That is like the story,
Yeah.
right? And so I wanted to do it that way through a human element. And then the fantasy piece is just like the cool part. I always think it's the cool part. The heart of any story is always the human element. It doesn't matter whether you tell it with dragons or not, right?
Yeah.
It's the emotional beats that matters the most.
Would you say that adding in that fantasy element, so like the dragon can, the bird folk, and all of that, adding that in while you're telling a story of enslavement with its brutalities, was that a way to not water it down, but maybe tell the story in a way that wasn't so harsh?
Yeah, I wanted to tell the story in a way that was truly accessible. When I started writing this, I was very clear that I was writing it so it could be accessible for kids that was like middle school up. It's what I call my all ages book. So it's not all ages in the sense of that I'm writing at that middle school level, or that there's like a middle school kid running throughout the book. It's not that. But to your bigger point, with the fantasy piece, encourages people who might not otherwise want to pick up a historical fantasy, do so. So anytime people ask me about it, I say, no, first 40 years starts with 18. But then I always say, but then I add and I tell all the fantasy stuff. They're like, oh, I cannot tell you how many young children have run up to my table because they recognize Harriet's Escape. So one, kudos to our social studies teachers that they're doing something right in the schools, that they, at the very least, they probably know maybe 2 people, maybe 3, count Rosa Parks, Harriet and Martin Luther King, right? So, but I have middle school kids all the time, and I don't say that it's for middle school kids, but it's there, and they recognize that historical figure. They love the cover. The colors are cool, and so they run up to the table, and when I see that, I'm like, yes, my intent, I can see that coming forth when the young people are reacting to it in the way that they are, and they want to read it. And the great thing is they know a little bit about her, but they get to learn a lot more, but in a way that's really cool and fun for them.
And not that we should be disassociating, but from my experience, when you read stuff like that that's hard, it's kind of hard to stay in it, right? But because there is this fantasy element, it gives you a moment to kind of step back and be able to stay in it, as opposed to constantly be reliving, what happened to actual people. Yes, this did happen to actual people, but as you're trying to allow your brain to absorb the information, sometimes the trauma of that and it being connected to, what you actually know, it can put up a wall per se. But because you have that fantasy element, for me, I felt like it brought that wall down and allowed me to digest it a little bit more, because I could take somewhat of a side view of it, that when it's getting hard, when it's getting tough, this is dragons, this is, you know what I mean? And I don't know, that could be controversial because maybe we should be feeling it, but like you said, for that middle school child, or for people who maybe aren't developed enough to be able to consume the truth in that way, I think this makes it a little bit more digestible. Just my opinion.
I agree. And you put wins in. For any book, because I have some other like really heavy books. You put all different types of wins in. So, and it's different ways to define like a win. A win could be a really touching moment with her parents. A win could be some touching moment with her with one of her siblings, or when she or when of course when she finally runs away and she comes back. So it's different ways emotionally as an author that you kind of can be up here and you start to kind of bring the your reader back down here, so they can take that little breath and then you bring them back up. So, but you can do that with any book at all, and you really should, right? You don't want to stay here all the time. You got to give them people an opportunity to breathe.
Yeah. Okay, so it's clear that the dragon king correlates with the white enslavers, and the bird folk correlate with the black enslaved people. Are the Harpies, do they represent the Native Americans? Because when I read it, I mean, you don't explicitly say it, but obviously you can make those correlations. And so we have these Harpies they're kind of going along with the story, but they're riding that line of, and sometimes they're oppressed, and sometimes they can be the oppressor. And so they're kind of in and out of this dynamic. And it made me think about Native American people, but then I wasn't sure if that's where you were writing from.
I was in certain parts. I love when I read that question when you sent it to me. I was like, it was so cool because you really got that. And it's not saying that every time you saw Harpy that's what it was, but you have people who were involved in enslavement on various levels. And so in the very beginning, in the prologue, it is the allegory. It's definitely taken from the scene with Christopher Columbus and all his people, and when they came to the island and they was like, where's the gold?
Right.
And they're like, well, you might see a little bit of sparkly here, but there's like no gold. And they're like, oh, no. There's gold there, right? And so then they're in, put them all on a lot of them on a boat, decimated basically a large portion of that Taino population. But yes, that was really what I was going for the most part with the Harpies there. So it was kind of like a big push and pull with the Harpies and the bird folk in the book.
I also was thinking, before we were able to have this conversation, I was like, well, maybe she's capturing a few different people in this
That is true.
umbrella as Harpies, because some of the things that the Harpies were doing, I'm like, well, I could also see this as being like maybe some of the
poor whites.
Yes, some of the immigrants that came over who were not a part of the American culture, but still had their foot in, half out. Sometimes indentured servants, but then also getting to a place where they can have servants themselves. So I didn't know which way you were taking it.
All of that.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, that's why I said sometimes it's this way, but absolutely, especially when you had, so you had, for example, you have slave owners who were very wealthy. They could have, big plantations, maybe dozens, hundreds of enslaved people, right? But then you have others who could maybe only afford that one, only afford that two. But for them it was like a big deal. So so when you had, and so in the book, and just like as in real life, they could either sell themselves out or rent themselves out, or in actually Harriet Tubman's family's case, because their owners they had a lot of money issues, they would like rent them out. And so she was running out from a very young age. And so she was renting out to people who couldn't have these huge plantations, but they could afford to rent out one or two. And that's where she would actually receive most of her abuse from these female slave owners. And that's another piece that doesn't really get a lot of attention about the level of brutality that really was these white female slave owners with the people who lived in their homes. And so I really wanted to show that piece as well.
Okay, you choose to represent the enslavers as dragonkin, and so they're physically more powerful. They're mystic. They have this dominance. At displaying them as dragons, what did that allow you to express about control and fear that may not have come across the same way in human form?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I love that question. I love it because it's actually all the things as an author I should think about. And so previous to this book, I wrote 2 other books with dragons. And I didn't go down the road of dragons are bad and dragons, I didn't do those tropes. But for this one, I really wanted to lean into certain tropes. One of the tropes for dragons is that they are like hoarders, right? That they are collectors of like gold and all this stuff. And so we've seen it like the Hobbit or whatever, and you see them with all in their lair in the mountain somewhere. And it's just all these riches. So I was like, oh, that works out really well. So in general, dragons are big, scary creatures. And how do you get away from a dragon, by the way, right? Yeah, not getting away from a dragon. But the trope I played into was about the big collectors or hoarders. And so the whole idea is they collected and hoarded anything that was beautiful and lovely. And so you have what's lovelier than these beautiful Sankofa birds. And so they collected them. And they used them, and they collected other things too. And so her owner, that was one of the things. She was so proud of her hoard of beautiful, unique bird folks. So it's all about their plumes and all about their beautiful feather colors. And so it also went to the fact that, and so I made them flightless. So it's about what's up here and what's here. You're not going to outrun them. You're not going to fight them. So you have to outsmart them. And that was what she did time and time again. She outsmarted people. Now I'm like 4'11". 4'11". I'm not beating up too many people. I'm not outrunning too many people, right? But I have a brain. I think it works fairly well. And she did as well. And so she was super duper smart. She was very strategic, very creative. And so when I took the time to show her missions, I wanted to show that area of strength. In my other books, they will blast you with something. They do all the cool, fantastical, fun things that you want to read about. But that's not the strength here. The strength is of mind and of heart.
And so then on that same kind of page, you made this Sankofa verse Flightless. Because, I mean, as you are the author writing this, you could have reimagined that as anything. And so not only did you give the dragon, their powers and their strengths and all of that, but then you take it a step further, and now the birds that maybe flying away may have been their only recourse, they don't have that either. Was that intentional? And
Yes.
then I guess what did that limitation of them being flightless allow you to explore with the characters?
Absolutely. Making them flightless was definitely intentional. It just added that extra layer of I have these things that should lend itself to freedom and to flight and to all the things that I look up in the sky and I see that I should be able to do, and yet I can't. And it's that level of not just frustration, but almost like maybe even an animosity of self. Like, what is the point of all of this that I have if it's not going to facilitate my freedom? So it's kind of like just that extra layer of, yeah, I have these wings and I can't do anything with them. But when they shifted, they could run faster. They had more endurance. So that stamina was a lot better. So it yielded something good. Sometimes your strength is not always just going to be this physical piece. Sometimes it's other strengths that we need to lean into. And so that's what I really wanted to tell was that story. I did not want to have like car chases in the sky of dragons trying to fly after bird shifters.
Yeah.
I mean, how many aerial pursuits am I going to possibly have?
Yeah.
But think about how many ground ones. And that's the other thing. Sometimes people are in power, their mind is always thinking up here. And so they make points about they're flying over here, but they're not looking at what's going on the ground, what's right below them, because their mind is always up here because they think they're so much better than everyone else. So sometimes you don't have to compete with them at this level. You compete with them from your area of strength.
I also thought about it. I also personally made the comparison of enslaved people being, bred to be like bigger, stronger, etc. A lot of times, even more so than the people that own them. But that strength could not be used against it. Well, I mean, in some rebellions, obviously, but writ large, it couldn't be used to free yourself out of a situation. So you could be the strongest, but you're limited in the space that you're in. And so when you talk about feeling resentment to like, I have these wings, I can't use them. I think for me, I made the connection of that's probably how people felt. Like, I have these skills, I have this strength, I have this, but I'm in a situation where I can't, even if I were to try to use that, it would be to my detriment.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, how intentional were you about using fantasy to create an emotional entry point, or did the fantasy play a part into opening up emotionally how people would receive the story?
Yeah, so like I said, the accessibility piece, but also, so if there's a point in her life that I wanted to depict, I had to think about it in in the fantastical way, meaning like, what's the point of her being able to shift into a bird if I never show her shifting into a bird? You say, what's the point of having dragons if I never show them like as dragons doing things that dragons do? And dragons are also like dragon shifters. So it's I never have fantasy creatures in my books as like props. You have to show them being whoever, however you choose to define them. And so even in doing historical pieces, I had to show what it really looks like with that fantasy, element in there as well, because you want to be respectful of that too. Because some people entryway is through the fantasy piece and they get the history. Some other people enter through the history and they get the fantasy. So you want to honor both parts. I hope I answered your question.
The story doesn't present courage as fearless. It shows different ways of having courage, even sometimes in the midst of fear. Um, and it feels like that was chosen intentionally. So, what does courage look like for Minty in moments where she should be maybe afraid, or where she could choose safety, but she's not choosing that, and she's in a situation where the courage is coming from sometimes a place of maybe not even feeling courageous, or feeling like you should be in fear.
Yeah, I think the act of being courageous, it it comes from or acting on it. Sometimes it comes from a point of frustration, resentment, anger, hate. I think I have a line in there. She just like, she just like hates them. And you're like, yeah, all the people have done. Yes, it makes sense. But even, you act on points of fear. I think people do a lot of things that we label as courageous and brave, and the foundational moving forces that they are afraid. And sometimes that fear is, if I don't do anything, then I'm never going to move beyond this point. If I don't do anything, then I'm just going to be brutalized even more. If I don't do anything, then this person over here, these people over here, that something bad is going to happen. Fear is a huge driving force for action as much as it can be a driving force to do nothing at all, which is still a decision that people make. When you do nothing, you choose to do nothing. And the truth of the matter is, when you look at conditions, you can understand why people would choose to do very little. And when we talk about community and family, if I am a mother and you're threatening to sell my children, how much control do you have over me? If I'm a man and you come in and you take my wife out, but if I don't allow you to take my wife out, the next day my children are going to be sold away, or you're going to be. You kind of see what I'm saying? So when you want to have family because they hold you together emotionally, but there is also a weakness to that as well, because it makes you vulnerable. It makes it where people can control you or manipulate your emotions. And that becomes really difficult. And that's why you had so many women who was difficult for them to flee, because they had to decide between, are my children old enough for me to flee with them and they can keep up, Or will they cry? Will they whimper? Are they going to be too hurt or too exhausted for me to be where they need to go? Or do I have to make that hard decision to leave my children behind? And the answer is all of that happen. That's the undergirding piece is like fear, but it's also that yearning for more. And that yearning for more will have people doing the most amazing things in good ways and bad ways as well. But none of it is a lack of pain involved.
Sticking with that family piece, there were moments where the characters had to draw strength from each other. And so what did you want those scenes to say, or what were you trying to reflect about connection and solidarity when people are facing overwhelming systems?
Yeah, it's just so her parents had 9 children. It was like 4 girls and 5 boys. And so that's a lot of characters, by the way, on top of the fact that you have these other characters. And so what I tried to do in the book was to show like it's like solo scenes. So you know how what is her interaction with her oldest brother versus what is her interaction with her youngest sister. And so I tried to give them those one-on-one moments. So when something would happen, because I already know something's going to happen, right? I got the timeline. I already know something happened. You feel it more as a reader because you've had an opportunity to see her interact with these people in real time. She's kind of like right in that middle piece. And so if I show her with one of her sisters and you see them doing whatever, and then you're like, oh, she was sold away. It hits harder. And then that becomes a driving force or something else. But you also see that reverberation in the family. And she can see it impacting her parents. I had one conversation, because I could not have the conversation in there, in which, their children, some of the children sold off, and then the mother was pregnant, and she's just like, are we doing the wrong thing continuing to have children, knowing what could possibly happen? You can't tell me conversations like that did not occur. I didn't have to read that in the book to know that we've had those conversations. But I thought it was necessary, and it was real type of talk that you really need to have in the book. It's not that there's a right or wrong answer to it, but it's a discussion that parents would have.
I also picked up on it in the scene where her brother decides to go, but he wasn't going to at first, but it's only, I guess, after he had some time to sit with it and think about it, and he has this realization that, well, my sister has done this, and if she can do it, then I can do it. Or I think he said something effective, I'm not going to let you go without me. Speaking of drawing strength from other characters, we don't know if that conversation really happened, but I think that that's a realistic conversation. That your sister has gone out there and done this, and now you, as the brother, are sitting back and kind of assessing your situation. And even though you're afraid and scared, and I think it's a comparison thing, but it's almost like, well, if she could do it and make it and come back, then what's my excuse? Even though he did have an excuse for why he could have chose to not do it, but I think he tapped into that strength that she had, or maybe that he thought she had, and that was the thing that motivated him to go.
No, absolutely. And we don't want to gloss over the fact, well, he was you have like older siblings, she had younger ones, but the whole gender, right? That she was able to go out and do something to the degree that, maybe her brothers did. And it wasn't
as a woman at that.
As a woman at that. So, you have those layers as well. But yeah, I wanted to show the closeness of the family, and how they were all impacted in various ways, some more directly as far as something that actually happened to you, but you're still my sister, you're still my brother, and whatever happened to you is emotionally impactful for me. So I did want to show that a lot. So really, it is a book about her family, as much as it is about her missions. Because to me, the missions don't mean nearly enough without that foundational family piece.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to circle back to it because within a system that was designed to strip people of power, Minty still is able to make choices that shift the outcome for not only her, but for the people around her. And so, how did you approach writing agency for a character in a world where freedom, if they had any, was constantly under threat?
It's great. And you know what? I didn't even have to work hard at the agency piece because it's built into her character. So, you read about, she talked about really just being beaten like every day in these homes. Again, mainly by by the women of the homes. And she did various little things. Like one part, she really did like run away to like the woods and everything. Stayed out all night, knowing what was going to happen when she got back. That's agency. One time when she was going to be spun, she kind of like no, not gonna do it. There's so many different ways. She would sneak home at night to spend time with her mother, or sneak away to another slave owners to spend time with her sisters. All those are different acts of rebellion. And so everything is not these big acts. A lot of things are those small everyday acts. Working slow, we know, breaking tools, stealing food. All of those are different acts of rebellion that clearly shows that agency is still there, even when you have this huge oppressive system.
Yeah. As we round it out, what is it that you hope readers walk away from questioning or rethinking after they finish the book?
That's a good question. I think is a very baseline is that they feel that they have a better understanding of this huge historical figure who, we have like a little dollar piece. I purchased that when it first came out that she's on we have like Cynthia Erivo, we did a movie, we have on stamps, we have all these books written about her. And I can almost guarantee you people still don't know that much about it. So I want people to leave feeling that, man, I learned a lot even while enjoying this story. That's the most important piece, is that they really understand more about this character, but also how you can make contemporary connections to those historical times. And I'm going to say, unfortunately, so we can, if it encourages deeper dives or conversations and reflections within yourself and with other people. All of that is great. When a book lingers beyond that last page with someone in their heart and their mind, then that's a really, really good thing. And if you're a young person who doesn't really read a lot and it encourages you to want to continue to read and read something else, whether it doesn't have to be one of our books, but you recognize the power in reading, that's a win.
Yeah. Do we have any questions from the audience before we close it?
Question?
Yes.
So you mentioned that she tried to get her sister out, but her sister resisted. May I ask, what was the reasons for that? And did you change anything in the book, or is that a spoiler?
It is a spoiler. No, I didn't change it. In the book, it was one sister. She went back for her like maybe like 3 or 4 times, honestly, and there was a reason. There's a reason why she didn't go with her, but that was like a really big sticking point, and I think it really stayed with her for a very long time after that. But yes, I don't want to talk about, but it is a historical good reason why she did. But I really wanted to show what happened there, and I did. Yeah. This isn't even my original cover. I didn't have my hardback here. I have another cover for this. This is my Kickstarter cover. And so when I did my Kickstarter, I commissioned a new cover for it. And so many people like the Kickstarter cover. I decided to keep the cover for the paperback, and the hardcover, my original one, I kept it for the hardcover because I get people who like both of them. This one is really good, especially since I'm trying to move the book into schools and have people reviewing the books for inclusion in schools. Is that visually for young people, you can see like the escape piece with it. The other one is a bit more, you can see it's a bit more fantasy. So my adults really love it because the cover, I don't have it here, it's really beautiful. And so down here is one of maybe 4 or 5 public domain images of Harriet Tubman. If you look into in the back of the book, I have like discussion questions in the back of the book. I have some other images back there, but one page has about, like I said, like 4 or 5 public domain images of Harriet Tubman, and some is with us a little bit young, not super duper young, but younger than she is here. But we're used to seeing her.
One thing I wanted to ask is not on my list of questions, but the feathers as currency, was that just something to like add to the fantasy piece, or was that something that you felt like we needed to make a historical connection?
I definitely did it to add to the the fantasy portion of it. But the whole idea of plucking the feathers and being able to like sell them. I even had a scene in there, and when you know when Black people were lynched, and you know how people thought it was a good idea to cut off certain body parts. So I even put stuff in there like that. But it's the whole piece. It's just like an extra layer of not having control over your body. That people can take and take and take for their own benefit, and do not care about the physical, much less the emotional pain of that. So sometimes that fancy piece was really meant to represent real life actions that were taken or things that were done to African people. So this is what I call my Seizing Freedom series. Harriet Tubman is the first historical figure that I cover. When you get to that very last piece, I name the second historical figure, and then I'll do a third one.
Okay, that answers my question because I'm like, are we gonna get a sequel? But we'll go into other historical figures, which is fine. Where can people find you?
I am I'm not on TikTok anymore. Stop doing that. I did. I'm not
Understandable.
But as far as social media, I am still on Instagram, most and on YouTube, but most places I'm simply Indy Jones. I know people think it's Indy, like IND, like Indiana Jones, but those are actually my real initials. But Indy Jones author. Same thing for websites. Again, any place you look, just put my Indy Jones in, and then, again, Instagram's Indy Jones author, and that's basically where I am for social media.
Okay. And also, she has her table right here if anybody's interested in something by the table today. Thank you so much
Thank you
for doing this.
This is
I
fun.
really appreciate it. Any last words before we go?
I thank you for your time and for listening to me and for your interest as well. That's an interest in me, but for your interest in Harriet Tubman, because why not, right? So thank you all. Appreciate you. I appreciate you. Those are great questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification button, tell a friend, and tell a friend.
Drop down in the comments.